everybody, welcome to another video. In this video we're going to talk about the hotly debated subject of strap height. How high or how low should you have your strap? This is something that causes quite a lot of, shall we say, hostility and animosity in the guitar community, to say the least. It's even been the subject of criticism, particularly aimed towards players who have their strap unusually high. So we're going to kind of go into those issues. We're going to talk about the pros and cons of having your strap too high or maybe too low. And ultimately we're going to talk about what is the optimal strap height. So we're just going to get straight into it. So I'm going to kind of start with a little story about this. And this is when I was first learning to play and kind of, just getting a grip with the instrument. So when I was practicing, I used to inevitably, practice sitting down, as most of us do. And I'll be playing this thing fine because obviously the guitar was at a fairly comfortable and kind of optimum position. It would feel fine. It would, it would come out okay and everything. And then I go to practice standing up, and all of a sudden it just goes completely to pot. It doesn't feel right. It's just difficult. None of the notes come out properly or anything like that. And that's because all of a sudden the guitar has literally gone from being here to being down there. So, and that's because the strap wasn't kind of set properly. And eventually I kind of managed to sort of come up with a sort of solution for it. I sat there thinking, why is this just not happening? What's wrong with this? I've been practicing this thing for ages and it's just all of a sudden going to pot when I'm standing up. Eventually I came to the conclusion that if I have my strap at kind of at just a one set position, I won't have to make any adjustments. So I don't have to make any adjustments, when I'm so if I practice a fairly difficult thing sitting down, I don't have to make any real adjustments when I'm standing up. So, and that saves a bagload of practice time, to say the least. So, and that was it. I was just kind of like, oh, okay, this is feeling easier now. I don't have to kind of practice in two different ways, which to me was pretty counterproductive and fairly time consuming. So that's kind of my little story, if you like, on how this whole thing, strap height, became an issue and how I resolved it. But then it got a little bit more. I started to face criticism for it. So which leads me on to the next bit. So I spent the majority of my formative years with my guitar pretty much at this height. It was sometimes a little bit lower, maybe a little bit higher, kind of depending on the guitar I was using at the time. But really, it was it was about this, and it's been like that pretty much ever since I can remember. And when I first started going out in the land of gigging and playing with bands and stuff like that, I started to face a fair bit of criticism for how it was because no one else seemed to have it at that height. I knew why I had it at that height and everything. I knew that it felt comfortable and it allowed for like kind of an optimum performance level. But I used to face all kinds of criticisms for it. And all kinds of, sometimes mandates a little bit as to how it should be. Or it shouldn't be there, you're a chest hugger. It should be at least at belt height and all that kind of stuff. And it's really kind of bizarre. It's people have made have made it into a kind of a very dogmatic issue. But there are reasons why I've had it at this height the whole time. And really, and obviously because of the kind of music I've been playing, a lot of it requires kind of, stretch, like stretchy stuff, like for your thumb to be kind of at the back of the neck, things like that. It's that style of playing. For it to be at this height is the most ideal because obviously when I practice this stuff, I do inevitably sit down for most of it. So when I go to stand up, no real adjustment. It's kind of, there's no difference, no discernible difference. So, and it's a lot better for my hands as well. I'm a lot more relaxed, and it's just everything is just easier that way. So even when I do kind of your more conventional kind of guitar stuff, there's no like real kind of, I don't have to make like this kind of, strenuous effort to make those notes come out, you know what I mean? Like that, it's just like that, and it's just, if I had my guitar down here, I would have to constantly make adjustments for that kind of technique, particularly in that realm of sort of technical playing. So that's the kind of reasons I've had the guitar at this height the whole time. It's just the perfect spot for me. It's just the right place, and I've never had an injury from it either. I've not had to kind of bend my wrist unnaturally. I've not kind of been there's been no kind of tension issues with that or anything like that. So it's just in that perfect spot for me. So those are the reasons why I've had it at this height the whole time. Like I said, I faced quite a lot of mockery for it in my formative years, but nowadays it's pretty okay. I think people can see that, yeah, he plays his guitar like that, and that's obviously just how he likes it. So that's kind of the reasons outlining that. Now I'm going to talk about the kind of the reasons why people might have it a bit lower down, and kind of the pros and cons of having it that way. So let's talk about that. So for this part, I've lowered the guitar to a noticeably lower height, and I'm going to talk about how that feels and kind of how that affects your playing, and sort of like how that affects guess the aesthetics of it as well. Because obviously playing your guitar up here versus playing your guitar down here looks a certain way. So we're going to talk about obviously how it affects your playing. Obviously, we're going to talk about how kind of how it'll look on stage. So how it affects your playing, for example, is obviously things like that aren't too bad. You can still obviously do most of your bends, and there won't be it'll still be okay. Like that, even your sweeps and all your arpeggio and stuff. But when it starts to come to stuff that requires maybe a little more muscle, you start running into problems, particularly in like kind of your left hand positioning, because obviously your left hand position, now your hand is kind of on a bit more of an angle at this point. Your hand just has to work hard in order to do that. So when it comes to stuff that's like 3 note per string, and stuff that requires your thumb to be at the back of the neck, that's where it starts to become a little more strained. And to be honest, it feels a little bit, it's not particularly comfortable to me. It's just not what I like. But there is a reason why a lot of the kind of like, I guess a lot of the famous, some of the famous guitarists put their foot up on the monitor. That isn't just for show. So, I mean, the story I remember for this is when Joe Satriani was writing Crushing Day off the Surfing with the Alien album. He mentioned that he wrote the tune with the guitar pretty much like this, really kind of high position in a less than and sitting down, I think, on like a really high, like a low chair, or something like that. Anyway, don't quote me on that. But he said that when he went to try and play it at this height, play the guitar at this height, or try to play the solo particularly, all of a sudden it just didn't. He couldn't do it, because obviously he couldn't stand there looking cool and everything. So there is a reason why, for example, when he's obviously played that song a bit later on, he's had to put his foot up on the monitor to get those stretches, because obviously they're going to be really difficult to get at this height. So there is a reason for that. It isn't just about the aesthetics. It's obviously because most of the time on stage, you might want to just spend, just looking like this and looking cool, and obviously, when it comes to the hard solo, which is only one small part of the song, it's probably no bother to put your foot up on the monitor like that and kind of look a bit cool to people. So there is an aesthetic, there is like a look, like a stage presence that comes with obviously having your guitar like this. Admittedly, it does look cooler. It does. It kind of looks stereotypically cooler. It's a bit of a, you could play a blazing solo, your hair blowing about, everything, and it just, proper MTV moment. So, but like I said, it's just not really a position that's that comfortable for me, irrespective of how cool it looks. And like I said, it can, depend on how low you have it, it can start forcing your wrist at quite an unnatural angle as well. So you've got to take note of that as well. So there is there is sort of the medical part of it as well. There's obviously you don't want to be sustaining injury in the name of just trying to look cool on stage. You know what I mean? It has to be, your playing has to have an element of functionality to it as well. So that's a rundown of having the guitar really low and looking cool and rock and roll. I've got to admit, this is quite weird. I don't normally have it like this, but there we go. So I'm going to wrap up this video pretty soon, but there is one question that still remains. What is the optimal strap height? At what height should you actually reasonably have your guitar? There's a lot of factors, there's a variety of factors that can influence this. So one, the style of music that you're playing. So if you play very technical stuff that requires a lot of stretchy finger work, so like Dream Theater, Periphery, all that kind of stuff, it's not going to be an ideal way forward having your guitar all the way down to your knees. It's not going to feel good. Nothing's going to sound right or anything like that. It's actually going to be pretty bad for you So it's just going to be a very unnecessarily strenuous performance. So that's one thing to take into consideration. There's the kind of look that you want to cultivate as well, because obviously when you have your guitar at a lower height, there's a certain image to it. You cultivate a certain look that way. Like I said previously, it does kind of look cooler. So there's that to think about. There's another thing that I don't think is talked about very much as well, and that's your height. If you're a very tall person, you could probably get away with having your guitar a little lower than most other people. Paul Gilbert's a really good example of that. He's a very tall guy, and he has very long arms, very long fingers. So it's probably more comfortable for him to have his guitar a little bit lower than probably other people. He seems to play and do all the very technical stuff and everything seemingly very comfortably. So that's kind of one exception where he would probably be quite okay with having his guitar all the way down here. It probably wouldn't be ideal for him at his height to have it up here. So that's one thing you are take into consideration. But most people are kind of just average height, so it probably wouldn't apply the same way. Really, the ultimate goal is to find a height that is good for you and balances between looking good and kind of being functional. So really, the kind of height that I think you should aspire to, like the kind of strap height that you should go for, is one that is great for sitting down practicing and great for standing up. So in other words, you want to make it so that there is no, like I said before, no real adjustment between sitting down and standing up. To me, that's the ultimate goal, and is to be able to play as well as possible, and just have, and just be functional. It's more about the functionality of your playing in that sense rather than the look or the aesthetic. So that is my 2 cents on strap height. I didn't think I'd be able to make a video as long as this on just how high you have your guitar, but there we have it. If you enjoyed that video, give it a thumbs up and do leave any thoughts and comments down below, and do consider subscribing to the channel. Hopefully I'll see you in the next video. Cheers now, thanks very much.